The galaxy had known peace for 11,000 years. Not perfect peace, of course. There were border disputes and trade wars, and the occasional shouting match between species who did not like each other very much. But true, large-scale, devastating war had been absent from the stars for longer than most civilizations had existed. The reason was simple. Every species in the Galactic Concord followed the same unwritten rule, a principle so deeply held that breaking it was considered not just wrong, but insane. They called it the principle of measured force. If someone hit you, you hit them back with exactly the same strength. No more, no less. You matched the threat, and then you stopped. To do anything else was wasteful and barbaric and dangerous, like setting fire to your own house to kill a spider. 4,200 species followed this rule. They had built their entire civilization on it. Courts enforced it. Fleets were designed around it. Children learned it before they learned to read. And then the humans arrived. Tarek Yoon stood in the center of the great tribunal chamber aboard the diplomatic station called Equilibrium, and tried very hard not to look nervous. He was the human ambassador to the Galactic Concord, which meant that every time humanity did something strange or alarming or confusing, he was the one who had to stand in front of 4,000 alien species and explain it. Today was one of those days. The chamber was enormous. It stretched upward like the inside of a cathedral, with rows of seats carved into the walls in every direction. Thousands of alien diplomats sat watching him. Some were tall and covered in fur. Some floated in liquid-filled pods. Some were little more than clouds of light. At the center of the chamber, on a raised platform of white crystal, sat Archon Solith, the chief magistrate of the Concord. Solith was a being made of living crystal, 12 feet tall, with a body that shifted between blue and violet, depending on his mood. Right now, he was a very deep shade of violet. Tarek had learned that this meant he was unhappy. The matter before the tribunal was supposed to be simple, a minor skirmish in the Helios Corridor, a lawless stretch of space on the edge of known territory. A group of pirates belonging to a species called the Vrekinali, an insectoid race known for raiding cargo ships, had attacked a human merchant vessel called the MSV Dunkirk. This sort of thing happened all the time. The usual process was straightforward. The tribunal would review the incident, assign fault, and order compensation. It should have taken an hour. It had now been 6 hours, and the chamber was so quiet that Tarek could hear his own heartbeat. The problem had started when the tribunal pulled up the combat logs from the Dunkirk. The Vrekinali had sent 12 raider craft to disable and board the ship. 12 against 1. By galactic standards, the Dunkirk should have surrendered immediately. That was the sensible thing to do. Hand over the cargo, file an insurance claim, go home alive. Every other species did it that way. Captain Ilaram Wangi of the Dunkirk did not do it that way. When the 12 raiders dropped out of faster-than-light travel and surrounded her ship, Captain Wangi activated every weapon on her cargo hauler. She armed the crew. She deployed hull-mounted cannons that a cargo ship was not supposed to have. She released a cloud of signal-jamming drones. She pointed her ship directly at the lead raider and accelerated. And she did all of this while broadcasting old Earth heavy metal music on every open frequency at maximum volume. The tribunal had watched the footage in stunned silence. A cargo hauler fighting back against 12 military raiders was like a rabbit attacking a pack of wolves. It was not done. It made no sense. But the humans in the gallery had watched the footage with a completely different expression. They looked proud. Still, as shocking as Captain Mwangi's response had been, it was not the part that frightened the Concord. The frightening part came next. While Mwangi was fighting, she had also sent out a distress signal, a simple emergency beacon, broadcasting on the standard human military frequency. The signal reached the nearest human outpost, a small naval station, 3 star systems away. And this was where things became difficult for Tarek to explain. Archon Solith pressed a control on his platform. The center of the chamber filled with a holographic replay of sensor data from the Helios corridor. It showed the Dunkirk, battered and smoking, but still fighting, surrounded by the 12 Reknali raiders. The timestamp in the corner ticked forward. 14 minutes after the distress signal was sent, the edge of the sensor display began to flash. FTL signatures. Incoming ships. The flashes multiplied. 2, 5, 10, 20. The number kept climbing. The alien delegates leaned forward in their seats. Some made sounds of confusion. Some made sounds of fear. The final count appeared on the display. 47. 47 human warships dropped out of FTL travel into the Helios corridor. Destroyers, frigates, electronic warfare vessels, a heavy cruiser, and at the center of the formation, the dreadnought UEN Persistence of Memory, a ship so large it had its own gravitational pull. 47 warships for 12 pirates. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in 100 languages. Some demanded explanations. Some demanded that the human delegation be removed from the station immediately. The Kural diplomat, a tall avian being with feathers that changed color with her emotions, physically backed away from the human section of the gallery. Her feathers had gone white, which Tarek knew meant she was experiencing a level of fear that her species normally reserved for natural disasters. Archon Soleth raised one crystalline hand, and the chamber fell silent. He turned his enormous violet eyes toward Tarek, and when he spoke, his voice resonated through the chamber like a bell struck in an empty church. "Ambassador Yoon," he said slowly, "explain this." Tarek straightened his jacket. He looked up at the holographic display, still showing 47 warships arranged in perfect attack formation around the debris of what had once been 12 pirate ships. He took a breath. "Explain what, exactly, Archon?" "Why," Solith said, and there was something in his voice that might have been disbelief. "Did your species send 47 warships to respond to 12 raiders?" Tarek looked at the display again. He looked at the 47 ships. He thought about it for a moment, and then he answered with complete honesty. 47 were available, he said. If we had more, we would have sent more. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Tarek had ever heard. 3 weeks before the tribunal, in the cold black emptiness of the Helios corridor, Raid Commander Sketh had been having a very good day. His 12 ships had dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation around a lone cargo hauler. The ship was human, which meant its cargo would be valuable. Humans carried strange and interesting things, medicine that worked on almost every species, dense high-energy food supplies, music stored on physical devices that certain collectors in the black market would pay a fortune for. It was going to be a clean job. Easy prey. Sketh was of Reknali, which meant he had 6 legs, 4 arms, a body covered in dark armored plates, and a set of mandibles that could cut through steel cable. His species had been raiding shipping lanes for centuries. They were good at it. They understood the rules. You showed up with overwhelming numbers. The prey species surrendered. You took what you wanted, and everyone went home alive. It was business. Nothing personal. He hailed the human ship on the standard communication frequency. "Human vessel," he said in the common galactic trade language. "You are surrounded. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Cooperate and no one will be harmed." There was a pause. Then a voice came back over the channel. It belonged to a woman, and she sounded not frightened but annoyed, like someone who had been interrupted during dinner. "This is Captain Elara Mwangi of the merchant vessel Dunkirk. I'm going to give you one chance to turn around and leave." Sketh's second-in-command made a clicking sound, the Reknali equivalent of a laugh. Sketh almost laughed himself. One cargo ship threatening 12 raiders. The human was either very brave or very stupid. Captain, Sketh replied, you are outnumbered 12-1. Surrender is your only logical option. Then the music started. It came blasting across every open frequency at a volume that made Sketh's sensor arrays distort. It was human music, the kind with screaming vocals and instruments that sounded like machines dying. It was so loud and so aggressive that two of his junior officers actually flinched away from their control panels. And then the cargo ship opened fire. Sketh had never seen anything like it. The Dunkirk was a cargo hauler. It was designed to carry freight, not fight. But somehow this human had mounted military-grade point defense cannons on its hull. Chaff and jamming drones poured out of its cargo bays. The ship lurched forward, accelerating directly towards Sketh's lead raider. And for one terrible moment, he thought the human was going to ram him. She did ram him. She drove her cargo ship straight into the nose of his lead raider at full speed, crushing the smaller vessel's cockpit and sending it spinning into the void. The Dunkirk's hull crumpled on one side, venting atmosphere, but the ship kept moving. It kept fighting. It kept playing that horrible music. Sketh rallied his remaining ships. They surrounded the Dunkirk and began cutting through its hull with precision lasers. The human ship was dying. Its engines were failing, its weapons were running out of ammunition, and fires were burning in 3 of its compartments. But the crew would not stop fighting. They fired hand weapons through breaches in the hull. They threw things. One human actually climbed outside the ship in a pressure suit and attacked a raider's hull with a cutting torch. It was insane. It was completely, absolutely insane. And then Sketh's long-range sensors began to scream. He looked at the display and felt something he had never felt before in his life. It was cold, and it was heavy, and it sat in his stomach like a stone. It was fear. The kind of fear that reaches into your chest and squeezes. FTL signatures, dozens of them, coming in fast. How many? He asked his sensor officer. The officer's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme distress. 47, Commander. 47 warships, multiple classes, destroyers, frigates, a heavy cruiser, and... The officer paused. A dreadnought, command class. 47 warships, for 12 raiders. Sketh's mind could not process it. It was like swatting a fly with a mountain. It made no sense. No species in the galaxy responded like this. You sent an equal force, maybe a slightly larger force if you wanted to be cautious. You did not send an entire battle fleet to deal with a handful of pirates. The human fleet dropped out of FTL in a formation that Sketh did not recognize. Later, he would learn that it was called a hammer and anvil, an ancient human battle tactic designed not to defeat an enemy, but to completely surround and destroy them with no possibility of escape. The fleet spread out in a wide arc, blocking every possible retreat vector, and the dreadnought at the center, the UEN persistence of memory, turned its weapons toward the Vreknali raiders with the slow, deliberate patience of something that had all the time in the world. They did not hail, they did not warn, they did not demand surrender. They simply opened fire. The sound that came through Sketh's hull sensors was like nothing he had ever heard. Every ship in the human fleet fired at once. Missiles, railgun slugs, directed energy weapons, things Sketh did not even have names for. The first volley hit his fleet like a wall of light and fire and death. 3 of his ships vanished instantly, turned to gas and dust in less than a heartbeat. 4 more broke apart, their armor peeling away like paper in a storm. The rest tried to scatter, tried to run, tried to do anything at all. It was over in 90 seconds. 12 raider ships reduced to nothing but expanding clouds of hot metal and frozen atmosphere. But the humans did not stop. For 4 more minutes, the human fleet continued to fire into the debris field. They targeted every piece of wreckage larger than a fist. They were not fighting anymore. The battle was over. There was nothing left to fight. They were making sure. They were being thorough. They were destroying even the memory of the Vreknali raiders in that sector of space. Sketh survived only by accident. The initial volley had knocked his ship into a wild spin that carried it behind a large asteroid. His engines were dead, his weapons were gone, and his crew was unconscious from the impact. He drifted in the shadow of the rock, watching through the cracked viewport as the human fleet calmly and methodically erased every trace of his raiding party from existence. Then they launched shuttles, small, fast rescue craft that spread out across the debris field. For one moment, Sketh thought they were coming for survivors. They were, but not Vreknali survivors. They were searching for the crew of the Dunkirk. They pulled humans out of the wreckage with gentle hands and careful movements, and they carried them back to medical ships that were already waiting. No one came looking for Sketh. When his backup power finally came online, Sketh activated his emergency communication array and recorded a message for the Vreknali homeworld. His voice was shaking. His mandibles would not stay still. He had been a raider for 30 years, and he had never been afraid before. Not truly afraid. Not like this. "They did not come to win," he said into the recorder. "They came to make sure nothing was left. Do not attack the humans. Do not provoke the humans. Do not go near the humans. They are not like the other species. They do not fight to win. They fight to end things permanently." He sent the message and sat in the dark, listening to his broken ship creak around him, and waited for someone to find him. In the distance, through the cracked viewport, he could see the human fleet reorganizing itself around the battered Dunkirk, surrounding the little cargo ship like a family, gathering around an injured child. He thought about what he had just witnessed. He thought about the 47 warships, and the 90 seconds, and the 4 minutes of firing into wreckage that was already dead. He thought about the rescue shuttles and the medical ships, and the way the humans had gathered their wounded with such tenderness after fighting with such savagery. And for the first time in his life, Raid Commander Sketh understood something that the entire galaxy was about to learn. Humans did not think about war the way other species did. Other species fought to achieve a goal. Humans fought to make a point. And the point they were making was terrifyingly simple. Touch what is ours, and there will be nothing left of you. The emergency session of the Concord Strategic Threat Assessment Council was held behind closed doors, in a chamber deep inside the station that was shielded against every known form of surveillance. The council consisted of 12 senior representatives from the galaxy's most powerful species, and they had gathered for one reason. They needed to understand the humans, not their technology, not their economy, not their diplomacy. They needed to understand how the humans thought, because what had happened in the Helios corridor had frightened them in ways they did not fully understand yet. Archon Solef sat at the head of the table, his crystalline body pulsing with slow, troubled light. Around him sat the representatives of the Kiral, the Thelosians, the Morthek, the Valesi, and 7 other species that made up the backbone of galactic civilization. Ambassador Tarek Yoon sat at the far end of the table, looking uncomfortable but composed. He had been invited to answer questions. He suspected he was not going to enjoy the experience. The first speaker was Professor Liath, of the Thelosian Xenological Institute. Liath was a Thelosian, a species of aquatic cephalopods who lived in pressurized water suits when on dry stations. She had 8 arms, large golden eyes, and a reputation as the galaxy's foremost expert on alien cultures. She had spent the last 3 weeks studying human history, and she looked like she had not slept once during that time. "I will begin," Liath said, her voice filtered through her suit's translator, "by stating something that I know will sound extreme. But I assure you, after reviewing the evidence, it is the only honest conclusion I can reach. She paused and looked around the table. Humans are the most dangerous species in the known galaxy. And it is not because of their weapons, or their ships, or their numbers. It is because of the way they think. She activated a holographic display and began showing images from human history. The council watched in growing horror. She showed them a conflict from humanity's past, called the Second World War. She explained that a group of nations had begun bombing each other's cities from the air. The expected response, by galactic standards, would have been to bomb back with equal force and then negotiate. Instead, one side responded by burning entire cities to the ground. Not military targets, entire cities. When the council members asked why, Leoth explained the human reasoning. They wanted to break the enemy's ability to fight, not reduce it, not match it. Break it completely. Then she showed them something worse. Near the end of that same war, one nation had developed a weapon of extraordinary power. A device that could destroy an entire city in a single explosion. And then, when the enemy did not surrender fast enough, they used a second one. They had only 2 of these weapons, Leath said quietly. They used both of them, not as a last resort, as a first option. The Morthek representative, a heavily armored reptilian being, leaned forward. Surely this was an ancient period. Surely they have evolved past such behavior. Leath's golden eyes blinked slowly. Allow me to show you something from a later period in their history. She changed the display. For approximately 50 years, humans lived under a military doctrine they called mutually assured destruction. 2 groups of humans each built enough weapons to destroy their entire planet many times over. They then pointed these weapons at each other and said in effect, if you attack us, we will destroy everything. Not just you, everything. The planet, the air, the water. All life. The chamber was silent. They kept the peace, Leath continued, by promising total annihilation. And here is the part I find most significant. It worked. For 50 years, it worked. They did not destroy themselves. They understood that the threat had to be absolute in order to be believed, and they were willing to commit to that absolute threat. They were willing to end their own species to prove a point. The Kiral diplomat, whose name was Aetheris, had been sitting very still throughout the presentation. Her feathers, which normally shifted through soft shades of blue and green, had gone completely white. The Kiral were empathic. They could feel the emotions of other beings. Throughout the entire session, she had been feeling what was coming from the human ambassador sitting at the end of the table. Now she spoke for the first time. Ambassador Yoon, she said, and her voice trembled slightly. What I feel from you is not shame. It is not regret. What I feel from you is, she paused, searching for the right word, acceptance. You know what your species is, and you have made peace with it. Tarek looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said simply. Professor Leathe continued. She explained that human behavior was not random or irrational. It had a biological basis. Humans had evolved on a planet that was, by galactic standards, a death world. Extreme temperatures, natural disasters, predators, diseases, and a chemical atmosphere that was slowly poisonous to most known species. To survive, humans had become what xenobiologists called persistence predators. They did not catch their prey by being faster or stronger. They chased it until it collapsed from exhaustion. They simply did not stop. This instinct, Leathe explained, had shaped everything about human psychology. Humans did not respond to threats by matching them. They responded by overwhelming them. They did not want to win fights. They wanted to make sure the fight could never happen again. And they applied this thinking to everything, not just warfare. When humans encountered diseases, Leathe said, they did not simply treat them. They hunted the diseases themselves. They tracked them across their entire planet and eliminated them from existence. When they needed to cross an ocean, they did not build a boat that could make the journey once. They built vessels designed to survive the journey 1,000 times over, in the worst possible conditions, carrying 10 times more supplies than they would ever need. She turned off the display and faced the council. Humans have a word that no other species in the galaxy has an equivalent for. The word is overkill. It means to use far more force than is necessary to accomplish a goal. What is remarkable is not that they have this word, it is that having the word has not stopped them from doing it. They can see what they are doing, and they keep doing it anyway, because deep in their biology, in the very core of how they think, the voice that guides them does not say neutralize the threat. It says make sure the threat can never come back. The Valesi representative, a being made of interlocking geometric shapes, spoke next. Then they cannot be reasoned with. They are animals, operating on instinct. Tarek spoke up from the end of the table. His voice was calm. We can be reasoned with. We reason very well, actually. But you are making a mistake that every species makes when they first encounter us. You think that because we can recognize our own excess, we should be able to stop it. You think that naming something gives you power over it. He paused. We have a word for overkill. That does not mean we will stop doing it. It means we will do it with full awareness of what we are doing. And we will do it anyway, because we have learned, over thousands of years of very painful experience, that it is better to use too much force than too little. Too little gets people killed. Too much keeps them alive. The silence in the chamber was thick enough to touch. Archon Soleth spoke for the first time. Several member species have formally requested that humanity be reclassified from Tier 3 cooperative partner to Tier 1 strategic concern. He let that sink in. Tier 1 strategic concern was the classification the Concord reserved for galaxy-ending threats. Rogue black holes, self-replicating weapon swarms, extinction-level events. The idea that a living, breathing, talking species could be placed in the same category was unprecedented. Before anyone could respond, a chime sounded through the chamber. A priority communication, marked urgent, from the human military network. Commander Ren Okafor, the human military attaché who had been sitting silently behind Ambassador Yoon, read the message on his personal device. His face did not change, but something behind his eyes went very still and very cold. What is it? Tarek asked quietly. Okafor stood up. He buttoned his uniform jacket with slow, precise movements. When he spoke, his voice was perfectly flat, without any emotion at all, and that absence of emotion was more frightening than any shouting could have been. The Vreknali have attacked the colony on New Helsinki, he said. 200 civilians are dead. He excused himself from the chamber and walked out. Every alien in the room watched him go. Aetheris, the cure-all empath, was shaking. Her feathers had gone from white to a color that none of them had ever seen before. A shade so pale it was almost transparent. What did you feel from him? Soleth asked her. Aetheris wrapped her wings around herself. Rage, she whispered. But not wild rage, not hot rage. It was cold, and it was organized, and it had a shape to it, like a building, like something constructed. She looked at the door where Okafor had disappeared. It was rage with a plan. No one in the chamber spoke for a very long time. Hive Admiral Keswick stood on the command bridge of the Vreknali flagship Ironmaw and watched the stars with the quiet confidence of someone who had already calculated every possible outcome. The attack on the human colony at New Helsinki had been deliberate. The humans had destroyed 12 raiders in the Helios corridor and humiliated the Vreknali in front of the entire Galactic Concord. That demanded a response, an eye for an eye. The humans had killed Vreknali warriors, so the Vreknali had struck back at their civilians. 200 dead. It was harsh, but it was proportional, at least by Vreknali standards. Now Keswick waited for the human retaliation. He was not a fool. He knew the humans would come. Every species retaliated when their people were killed. That was simply how the galaxy worked. The question was how large the response would be, and Keswick had done his calculations carefully. 200 human civilians dead. By the galactic standard of measured response, the humans should send a strike force to hit a Vreknali military target of roughly equal value. A supply depot, perhaps. Maybe a minor orbital station. Keswick had positioned his defense fleet to protect the most likely targets, and left the less important ones exposed as sacrificial offerings. Let the humans destroy a fuel depot or two. Let them feel that they had achieved justice. Then the matter would be settled, and both sides could move on. He had 300 warships under his command, more than enough to defend the home system against a proportional strike. 3 weeks after New Helsinki, the long-range sensor arrays at the edge of the Vreknali system began to detect FTL signatures. Keswick straightened in his command chair and ordered his fleet to battle readiness. This was expected. He felt calm and prepared. Then the sensor officer reported the count. The first wave was 100 ships, then 200, then 300. The signatures kept coming. They filled the sensor display like stars appearing at sunset. More and more and more, until the screen was so crowded that individual signatures blurred together into a solid wall of light. 614 warships. The entire United Earth Navy 3rd Expeditionary Armada. Keswick stared at the display. His mandibles hung open. His second-in-command made a sound that was halfway between a curse and a prayer. Around the bridge, officers stopped moving and simply looked at their screens with the blank expressions of people who were watching something impossible happen in front of their eyes. But the warships were not the worst part. Behind the combat vessels, hanging back in protected formation, were support ships, fuel tankers, mobile repair yards, factory ships capable of building replacement parts in the field, hospital vessels with medical facilities that rivaled anything on a planet, and communication arrays, massive ones, the kind that colonies used, not military fleets. These were not the tools of a strike force. A strike force came fast, hit hard, and left. This fleet had brought everything it needed to stay, indefinitely. They are not here for a battle, Keswick said, and he was surprised by how steady his voice sounded, because inside his chest, something was falling apart. They are here for a war. The human fleet arranged itself in a formation that covered every approach to the planet. There was no gap, no weak point, no angle of escape. It was a cage made of warships, and it had closed around the entire Vreknali home system in less than an hour. Then the broadcast came. It arrived on every Vreknali communication frequency simultaneously, in every known Vreknali dialect, spoken in a calm, clear, human voice that carried no anger and no threat and no negotiation. It was a statement of fact. Attention Vreknali military and civilian authorities. This is Commander Ren Okafor of the United Earth Navy. You have 12 hours to evacuate all orbital stations and surrender all military assets. After 12 hours, anything in orbit will be removed. This is your only warning. Removed, not destroyed, not targeted. Removed. As if the entire Vreknali orbital infrastructure was a mess to be cleaned up. Keswick's officers looked at him, waiting for orders. Every instinct told him to surrender. The math was impossible. 600 against 300, and the 600 were humans, whose ships were faster, harder to kill, and carried weapons that the Vreknali did not fully understand. But Keswick was a hive admiral. His people were watching. The entire species was watching. He could not simply hand over everything without a fight. All ships, he said, and his voice carried the weight of a decision he already knew was wrong. Engage the human fleet. The Battle of Rekanal lasted 11 minutes. The Vrekanali fleet fought with courage and desperation and everything they had. It did not matter. The human fleet moved like a single living thing, every ship coordinating with every other ship as if they shared one mind. Vrekanali warships fired their weapons and watched their shots splash harmlessly against human shields. Human weapons fired back, and Vrekanali ships came apart like they were made of glass. In 11 minutes, 80% of the Vrekanali fleet was destroyed. The remaining ships were disabled, drifting, their weapons offline and their engines dead. The humans had lost 4 ships, 4 out of 600. And then something happened that Keswick did not expect. Something that the entire galaxy did not expect. The humans stopped shooting. The moment the Vrekanali fleet was no longer a threat, the human weapons went silent. And then the rescue shuttles launched. Hundreds of them, small and fast, spreading out across the debris field. They flew to Vrekanali escape pods and pulled survivors out. They flew to disabled Vrekanali ships and stabilized their life support systems. They treated Vrekanali wounded alongside their own, in the same medical bays, on the same hospital ships, with the same doctors and the same medicine. Keswick was pulled from the wreckage of the Iron Maw by a human rescue team. The young officer who cut him free from the twisted metal of his command chair was a woman who could not have been more than 25 years old. She had blood on her face, her own or someone else's, and she handled Keswick's injuries with the careful attention of someone who did not see an enemy. She saw a patient. Over the next several days, the humans took apart the Vrekanali military machine with the same terrifying efficiency they had used in battle. They dismantled every weapons factory on the planet. They deactivated every defense satellite. They confiscated every warship that could still fly and scrapped the ones that could not. They were thorough in a way that went beyond military necessity. They did not just remove the Vrekanali ability to make war. They removed every tool, every blueprint, every piece of infrastructure that could be used to rebuild that ability. And then, when every weapon was gone and every factory was silent, the humans did something that no one in the galaxy had ever seen a conquering force do. They started building. Construction ships moved into orbit and began assembling structures. Not military bases, not prisons. Schools, communication networks, water purification systems, agricultural stations designed to work with Vrekanali biology, medical facilities staffed by human doctors who had spent the trip learning Vrekanali anatomy from captured medical texts. Supply drops began falling to the planet's surface. Food, medicine, building materials. Each drop was stamped with a simple message in the Vrekanali language that read, "From the people of Earth." Commander Okafor addressed the Vrekanali from his ship in orbit. His voice was broadcast to every screen and speaker on the planet. He spoke calmly and clearly, the same way he had delivered the original ultimatum, without anger, without gloating, without any emotion that could be mistaken for cruelty. "We are not here to destroy you," he said. "We are here to make sure that what happened at New Helsinki can never happen again. You will find that we are as excessive in our mercy as we are in our fury. We will rebuild what we have broken. We will help you become something better than what you were. But you will never again have the power to kill our people. That is not a punishment. That is a fact." Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds and stations, billions of beings watched the events in the Vrekanali system unfold on their news feeds. They had expected the humans to burn the planet. Some had predicted a massacre. A few optimistic analysts had suggested the humans might simply establish a blockade and leave. None of them had predicted this. None of them had imagined that the humans would conquer an entire species in 3 weeks, and then immediately begin taking care of them like a parent taking care of a child who had misbehaved. On the station Equilibrium, Aetheris the Cural diplomat sat with Archon Soleth and watched the footage from Vrekanal. schools being built in the shadow of destroyed weapons factories, human doctors treating Vreknali children, supply ships arriving in a steady, endless stream. They did not just defeat the Vreknali, Aetheris whispered. They turned them into a protectorate. In 3 weeks. She looked at Soleth with her large, dark eyes. Who does that? What kind of species fights with that much violence, and then heals with that much care? Soleth's crystal body had shifted to a color none of his aides had seen before. It was not violet for concern, or blue for calm. It was something between the two, a color that might have meant awe. The kind, he said slowly, that does nothing by halves. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Vreknal, and the galaxy was a different place. Not dramatically different. The stars had not moved. The trade routes still hummed with merchant vessels. The Galactic Concord still held its sessions in the great chamber aboard Equilibrium. But something had shifted beneath the surface of things. Something quiet and permanent. Like a crack in the foundation of a building that everyone could feel, but no one could see. No one attacked humans anymore. It was not a formal agreement. There was no treaty or declaration. It was simply something that every species understood the way they understood gravity or the coldness of vacuum. You did not touch human ships. You did not threaten human colonies. You did not look at human territory and think about taking it. The phrase had appeared first among the Kiral, in their musical language, but it had spread across the galaxy in a matter of months, translated into 17 different languages. Do not poke the humans. It was said as a joke sometimes, but no one laughed when they said it. Ambassador Tarek Yoon stood at the center of the great tribunal chamber once again, but this time the circumstances were very different. He had been invited to deliver an address to the full assembly of the Galactic Concord. It was the first time in the history of the Concord that a human had been given this honor. The chamber was full. Every seat was taken. Species that had not attended a full session in decades had sent representatives. They had come to hear what the human would say. Tarek looked out at the assembly and felt the weight of 4,000 civilizations watching him. He had spent weeks writing and rewriting this speech. He had consulted historians, diplomats, psychologists, poets. He had thrown away every draft because none of them said what he actually wanted to say. In the end, he had decided to simply tell the truth. Humans were not good at pretending to be something they were not. That was part of the problem and part of the solution. I know why you are afraid of us, he began. His voice was steady, carried by the chamber's amplification systems to every corner of the enormous room. I know because we are afraid of us too. A murmur passed through the chamber. Several delegates leaned forward. My species evolved on a planet that spent 4.5 billion years trying to kill us. Our world shook beneath our feet. It froze us and burned us and drowned us and starved us. The air itself was a slow poison to half the species in this room. The other animals on our planet were faster than us, stronger than us, had sharper teeth and harder skin. By every reasonable measure, we should have died out 1 million years ago. He paused and looked around the chamber. Thousands of alien eyes looked back at him. Crystal eyes, compound eyes, eyes that saw in spectrums he could not imagine. All of them watching. All of them listening. We survived because we refused to stop. That is the simple truth of what we are. When something threatened us, we did not run from it, or hide from it, or match it. We buried it. We overwhelmed it. We threw everything we had at it, and then we kept throwing things until there was nothing left. We chased our prey until it fell. We fought our predators until they learned to avoid us. We beat our diseases, not by treating them, but by hunting them down and erasing them from the face of our world. We crossed our oceans in ships built to survive storms that would never come, carrying supplies we would never need, because somewhere deep in our bones, in the very oldest part of our brains, a voice was always whispering the same thing. More. Use more. Send more. Build more. Make sure. Be certain. Never leave anything to chance. He let the words settle into the silence. You have a word that we learned when we joined the Concord. Proportional. It is a beautiful word. It describes a beautiful idea. Respond to a threat with exactly the force needed. No waste, no excess. Clean and elegant and rational. He shook his head slowly. We do not have that instinct. We never have. Instead, we have a word that none of you have an equivalent for. Overkill. It means to use far more than is necessary. And I want you to understand something about that word. We invented it. We can define it. We can see it clearly. And we have never, in our entire history, been able to stop doing it. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Tarek saw it in the shifting of bodies, the changing colors of feathers and skin, the subtle movements that meant discomfort in 100 different biologies. I know that frightens you. It should. It frightens us too. We look at our own history, and we see the excess, the destruction, the times we went too far. We see the cities we burned, and the weapons we built, and the enemies we destroyed so thoroughly that nothing remained. We are not blind to what we are. He took a breath. This was the part he had struggled with the most, the part that mattered. But I want to tell you something about a creature from our homeworld, a small animal called a honey badger. It is not large, it is not fast, it is not strong compared to the great predators of Earth. But it is so unbelievably aggressive and so utterly relentless that even animals 10 times its size learn to leave it alone. Lions, which are one of the most powerful predators on our planet, will walk away from a honey badger rather than fight it. But because the honey badger would make the fight so painful, so exhausting, and so costly that winning would not be worth it. A few delegates made sounds that might have been understanding. Or concern. It was hard to tell. Humans are the honey badger of this galaxy. I am not going to apologize for that. I am not going to promise that we will change, because we will not. We cannot. It is what we are. But I am going to tell you something that I think you have missed while you were being afraid of us. He looked directly at Atheris, the Kiral diplomat, who sat in her usual place in the third row. Her feathers were pale blue, cautious but listening. The same thing that makes us terrifying in war makes us extraordinary in everything else. We do not do anything by halves, not war, not peace, not friendship. When we fight with everything. But when we love with everything too. When we protect something, we protect it with the same overwhelming force that we use to destroy. When we build something, we build it to last forever. When we commit to someone, we commit absolutely and without reservation. He spread his hands, a simple human gesture of openness. You have spent a year being afraid of what we did to the Vreknali. And I understand that. We broke their fleet in 11 minutes and dismantled their entire military in 3 weeks. That is a terrifying thing. But I want you to look at what we did after. We built schools. We built hospitals. We fed their children and healed their sick and taught their young. We are still there. We will be there for as long as they need us. Not because we owe them anything. Not because we feel guilty. Because once we commit to taking care of something, we do not stop. Ever. Not the uncomfortable silence of fear, but the deep focused silence of people who are truly listening. So here is what I am offering you today, on behalf of humanity. Make us your allies, not your cautious, measured, proportional allies, your human allies. And we will defend you with the same terrifying excess that we use against our enemies. We will build for you. We will fight for you. We will bleed for you, not proportionally, not carefully, not with measured restraint, but with everything we have, every single time, because that is what we are. That is all we know how to do." He stepped back from the center of the chamber and waited. For a long moment, no one moved. The weight of 4,000 civilizations hung in the air like a held breath. Then Aetheris stood. The Kiral diplomat rose from her seat, her feathers shifting through colors so quickly that they seemed to glow. She walked down the steps from her row, crossed the open floor of the chamber, and stopped in front of Tarek Yun. She was taller than him by a full head. Her dark eyes looked down into his. Then she extended her wing. She spread it wide, the long iridescent feathers reaching out until they formed an arc over his head. It was the Kiral gesture of unconditional trust, the most sacred gesture her species had. It meant, "I place myself in your care without reservation." Tarek reached up and gently touched the edge of her wing. It was warm, softer than he had expected. Around the chamber, slowly, other delegates began to move. A Thalosian ambassador extended a tentacle. A Morthek representative lowered its armored head in a gesture of respect. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. Enough to begin something. In a quiet office on the station, Commander Ren Okafor watched the ceremony on a screen and allowed himself a small, tired smile. Then he turned back to his work. There were defense plans to draw up, supply lines to establish, training programs to design. If humanity was going to protect these species, they were going to do it right. They were going to do it with everything they had, because that was the only way humans knew how to do anything. 6 months later, deep in uncharted space, a lone merchant vessel sent out a distress signal. It was a Kiral trade ship, a small vessel with a crew of 12, and it was under attack by unknown raiders. The ship was far from Kiral territory, far from any military outpost, alone in the dark between the stars. But the ship was not really alone. It was registered under a human mutual defense pact. And when its distress signal went out, it was picked up by an automated relay network that the humans had built across 3 sectors of space, specifically for this purpose. The signal was processed, verified, and flagged in less than 2 seconds. Across 3 sectors, every human ship within response range received the alert. Patrol vessels changed course. A destroyer group diverted from a training exercise. A carrier that had been heading home for maintenance turned around and accelerated to full speed. An outpost on the edge of known space scrambled its ready squadron. All of them, every single one, for one small trade ship with a crew of 12. If anyone had asked the humans why they were sending so many ships for one small vessel, they would have been confused by the question. Of course they were sending everyone. That was how you responded when someone you had promised to protect was in danger. You sent everything. You held nothing back. You made sure. The galaxy had 1,000 words for restraint, for proportion, for measured response. Elegant, careful words that described a philosophy of doing exactly enough and no more. The humans had a word the others did not. Overkill. The galaxy had learned to fear that word. But they were beginning to learn that the humans had another word too. One that lived in the same place inside them, born from the same relentless, overwhelming, unstoppable instinct that made them send 47 warships for 12 pirates and 600 warships for one colony. Loyalty. And that word in the end scared them even more.